Broadcasting from the Cass Corridor in Detroit, this is The Metro, a slice of news, culture, and conversation. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Today on the program, Trump's first weeks in office have been a flurry of policy changes and controversies.
We'll try to make sense of this rapid pace and how to stay calm and informed amid the constant change.
Also, downtown Detroit could undergo another dramatic change with the capping of I-75. We'll get an update on that project. But first, what if you could step into a time machine and speak to people of the past? Imagine it. You go back to chat with someone who lived through the American Civil War. For many, going back isn't something we long to do, but it can be necessary to help inform our present and our future. What would that conversation look like between two Black women 160 years apart? Would they be able to relate to one another? That is one of the questions that we're wondering about.
The performance will take audiences back and forth from Sarah, an enslaved woman preparing to fight in the Union Army during the Civil War, and Sandra, a political science professor at a prestigious university fighting institutional racism. Confederates was written by executive artistic producer Dominique Morisseau. She's a Detroit native and Tony-nominated playwright. And joining us now in studio to discuss Confederates is Goldie E. Patrick, also a Detroit native, and Will Street. Goldie Patrick is a Detroit native, like I said, a professor of hip-hop theater. And Will Street is a Detroit native and a Philadelphia-based theater artist. He is also the winner of the Wilde Award for his work as Booth in Top Dog Underdog by Suzanne Laurie Parks. Goldie and Will, welcome to the Metro.
Welcome. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Of course. I always ask Detroiters as well when they sit down, what part of Detroit, East or West?
What up, though? I'm from the North End.
North End.
Off Woodward.
Yes. And Will?
I'm from the West Side, Northwest Side.
Yeah. Yes. I love it. Love it.
Yes.
So, Goldie, jumping into things, Confederates reminds us of different ways that racism in our country has stayed the same and how it has evolved. We meet two Black women divided by many decades and yet united by the enduring grip of racism. So what about this premise drew you to direct the play?
Oh, good question. There are a couple of different things. From a political perspective, my life work is around womanism. As an advocate, as an activist, as a professor, as a writer, everything I write centers on my belief in and of and for Black women and girls. So there was a natural tie in that regard. I'm also a long-term fan and collaborator with Dominique. And so us both being Detroit natives, coming from the Detroit poetry scene and both growing in the world of writing and telling these important Black stories, I've always been close to her work, whether I was sitting in the audience of it, whether I was on stage performing it, or whether I had the honor of directing it. So the combination of those two together drew me to the play. And I had a chance to work with the development of the play in 2018, and that was really special. And when it came to Detroit, I was like, well, when you call to do something, you got to answer the call. You know, they say why shoot the breeze about it when you can be about it? And this was that opportunity for me to put action and practice into my advocacy, my love for Detroit, and an opportunity to work with a playwright whose voice is so important in our time.
You know, Robin and I, we talk about the past and Detroit's history all the time. And one of the things that recently came up, we were learning a little bit about what was going on during the Black arts movement in the 60s in Detroit. I was just learning and fascinated by all of what was happening, especially poetry's role and theater's role in that movement. It was just like mind-blowing to find out some of those things, the first Black theater in Detroit in the 60s and all the things that were happening. So could you talk about the connection of activism and art and how it's manifesting today and one of the reasons why you decided to direct this play? Because right now we're seeing that we need both of those in areas of the country.
Yes. Ooh. So shout out to the pioneers of Black theater. I teach Black theater, and inside that, it's always valuable to speak names because we don't learn about them per se. They're not in the history books that tell us what theater is or what activism is or what American history is. And Detroit plays such a pivotal role. As a director, I personally am drawn to Lloyd Richards, his influence, his impact, and how he, as a director, understood how to work closely with a playwright to shape the play and to shape the play so that it told the truth of the intent of the playwright and for the audience. And when we think about August Wilson or Lorraine Hansberry, we can't ignore Lloyd Richards, right? Because that's how those works came to be. I also think of people like Ron Milner, who is part of that political voice, part of that, no nonsense, unapologetic blackness that I love. And I think Dominique loves too and does a great job of writing. When it comes to the story of activism, I want to lift up the two women in the cast that play Sandra, who is the professor who lives in contemporary times, and Sarah, who plays the enslaved woman who lives in the past. I want to lift up the two actresses, Whitney Johnson and Rebecca Rose Mims, because I'm learning from them. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned in terms of what the active approach to putting activism in play as a director is to dismantle hierarchy. Is to dismantle these notions that are really built from a white male perspective and a gaze of what it is to lead a vision of a play. And when I listen to these two women, I'm asking questions about what does it mean for their full body, their full spirit, their full soul to be a vessel to tell the story. And that becomes part of activism for Black women in all my ways that I work. It's like listening is the first step. If you want to advocate for someone, if you want to be an activist for someone, the first thing you do is listen to them. So I've learned a lot. And it'll influence my practice. And Monica Williams, who is our intimacy coordinator, has done a great job of making care the center of our culture as an ensemble as we put this play together. It's so much more than the production. We've become this community and family and fight the power all together. It's great. It's great.
You don't even understand how many ways my brain wants to go with this conversation right now, but I'm trying to stay on track right now. But, bringing Will into the conversation, I saw you perk up a little bit when you heard Ron Milner's name and hearing about the arts civil rights movement that was going on here in Detroit in the 60s. Talk a little bit about what that meant to you, because you did perk up quite a bit, and how it helped prepare you for not just this role, but prepare you for acting and representing yourself as a Black man as an actor.
Yeah. First of all, isn't my director so smart? Like, oh my God, what a lady. Jeez. Yeah, I mean, so I perked up when I heard Ron Milner because I recently got an original print of like this collection of Black plays, and he wrote the foreword. And in addition to that, one of my like theater OGs, Clyde Tyrone Harper, he told me a really funny story about Ron Milner that I will have Clyde Harper tell you. Okay. when he's on the show. And I don't know. It's like, I feel like as artists, there's like an ancestry that we come from. Like we have our bloodline, and then we have like the work that has influenced us. And that's like, I fit in that family tree of Black male theater artists for sure. So your Ron Milners, your Amiri Barakas, and some of the like Brendan Jacobs Jenkins. Sorry if I butchered his name, but like it's like a odd little fraternity. And I remember my first play in high school was an Amiri Baraka piece. And he was, a huge playwright for the Black arts movement. So any of those like OGs, old names, I always perk up because like I wouldn't be here. They're the GOATs.
And just preparing for this particular role, you had to understand certain emotions. You talked a little bit about care being the center of the whole entire cast and crew and production. But Will, being in that mindset of someone in the past, bringing that to life for audiences today, talk a little bit about preparing for that. And especially, hearing Goldie talk about what she learned from the other actors, especially about just emotion and activism. How did you prepare for this role, just being around it all? Yeah,
well, at first I was freaked out. And before I got the part, me and Goldie, we had a Zoom. And I expressed, like, I'm a little intimidated, like playing an enslaved, a person who's formerly enslaved, because like, how do I make sure that I'm honoring all that they are, despite, while also maintaining like the context of like the history, and how do I not make that a one-dimensional person by just doing the voice, because that's what I really dislike about a lot of slave narratives, is that it's all like it's become the stereotypical slave, and so I wanted to avoid that. And I think, you know, reading up on my Harriet Jacobs and Equianos definitely helped, and just being like, you know, that's like my great uncle. Like we're not that far removed if you think about it. And so yeah, I think, you know, the preparation was half me and half just having a team and a director who I really truly love and trust. Goldie E. Patrick is a genius, and I know it seriously. And you know, any intimidation that I may have had was immediately, you know, taken away just because of the team that we're working with and my director.
And Will, we're going to get back to you in a second, Goldie, because I want to definitely want to hear more from you. But Will, just sticking with you, because that's one of the questions was the character that you're playing. You're also playing a college student, but you're also playing a formerly enslaved man fighting for his freedom.
Sure.
And that was one of my questions to you: is how do you prepare for a role like this and give them pride and dignity and showcase their humanity outside of the circumstances that we're so used to believing that they were in? Because these are human beings, like you said, that's their great uncle and ancestors.
Yeah, they're people. Like in me, when I like, you know, code switch with my black friends, like, you know, Goldie talks about it all the time, where it's like, I'm not the first guy to come up with like puffing my chest out and being like, what you be like that? I'm not the first guy to do that. They were doing that way back then. And so like, it's not hard to find humanity in these folks when you're a human. And Goldie really emphasized that, of like, you really think like you're the first black woman to do a hip hop? Like they've been doing that for years. And so I think it just becomes easy the more you're like, I am this person. This is my history. And I believe that the way my ancestors will want me to honor them is just by being them and not really having that internal process of I have to play an enslaved person. I'm playing Abner. And Abner has a story. And there are so many rich stories that we don't hear about. And this is my part of putting it out there.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you're listening to The Metro on WDET Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vinson. We're speaking with Goldie E. Patrick, director of the new play Confederates, and Will Street, an actor in the play. Goldie, I want to talk about your father, if we could.
Yay.
Larry Patrick. Yay. He was a longtime advocate for educational equity in Detroit. He was a former president of Detroit's school board during a tumultuous time in the city. That was from 1989 to 1995. I read that he wanted parents to have as many choices as possible for the education of their children. And it had me wondering, how did growing up and witnessing his advocacy shape the work that you do today?
I appreciate that question. Thank you. I am my father's daughter. You know, I am named for the women on my mother's side, so I get that reminder. But boy, when you hear me talk, you see my daddy show up, right? You know, I got my mama face and I got my daddy's demeanor and my dad's politics.
He was an attorney as well.
Yeah, Harvard Law. He actually started the Black law student group at Harvard when he attended with another Detroit native, attorney Joe Smith. And I realized I was reading an article from his campaign years with the Hope Team, which is where he initially ran for the school board. And I was reading the article and I was taken by this one particular quote where he said, I don't have to prove my blackness or explain it. It's not new to me. It's how I've always been. And I sat with that and I was texting my sister discussing it. That Black was our identity with pride. In Detroit, Black has pride to it. That's part of how you know who you are. We all are. Like our mayor was Black. Our city council was Black. And the same is true for freedom. It was like we are the descendants of people who migrated to this city because they believed in great opportunity. And inside of that, they knew that they deserved, they wanted, and they would get freedom. And that's so much part of the Great Migration story. And education is synonymous with freedom. Our ancestors recognize it. They talk about it in the play. There's a line in the play that says, you mean reading books gonna make me free? And that, yes, your education gives you access to freedom, because regardless of what material things someone tries to take away from you, they cannot impede or take away your knowledge. That is why we're looking at a contemporary time where the government is seeking to then hinder knowledge because it is an access point to freedom. Growing up in a household, like, that was understood. It was, what are you reading? We had conversations at the table about global politics, understanding gender. My politics around women and as a womanist came from my father. When I was 9 years old, he knew I was different. He was like, listen, you can do anything you want to do. No man is better than you because he's a man. And that's just the truth. You will spend your life figuring that truth out. I'm telling you now. So my first paper in school was on Sandra Day O'Connor. I studied Shirley Chisholm. I met Shirley Chisholm. I met Rosa Parks. All of these things were very much how my political awareness was built and grew. And it's my father's influence. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It sounds like you have very much stepped into his legacy. He passed away 8 years ago last month. Mm-hmm. What do you think he would say about what's happening in Detroit right now and Detroit's educational landscape?
That's a good question. The good news is, much like this play has conversations with ancestors, I stay in conversation with my ancestors. They often just talk to me whether I'm busy or not. So I have had conversations with him about what's happening. I think the biggest thing overall, when we think about like a macro level politically of what's happening, is who did you expect to do something different? So much of what I really learned from my father was responsibility. My siblings and I all have the mantra he really embedded in us, tattooed on our body, because it felt necessary as a reminder. And it says, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? And I think that is the reality. It was the reality when he taught it to us. It's the reality now. It's the reality for immediate Detroit, right? Detroiters will always be the people that make Detroit. No one external can make Detroit. It's not a business that makes Detroit flourish. It's not a perception that Detroiters make Detroit flourish, because can't nobody beat us but us, right? And then the same applies for all of the larger movements that are happening. It is very much an opportunity for us to figure out how we will galvanize, support each other, and support ourselves to get the things we want and need.
I think you're instilling and reinstilling a lot of pride right now in a lot of Detroit residents listening right now. Detroit is a majority Black city. I want to end, Goldie, with you telling us why you think Confederates is an important play for Detroit right now.
I love Detroit. I bleed Detroit. Like I said, Detroit is a place of freedom. This play is necessary right now. There will be tons of conversations that happen in mixed company and closed doors at so many levels about freedoms, about liberties, about justice. And if Black women aren't centered, the conversation falls short. Until Black women, their needs and their rights are voiced by Black women, then the movement for freedom doesn't happen. Right. And so the invitation for Detroiters is come out to this show, get moved, get transformed. You're going to laugh because we laughing in the play. Yes, right. Our humanity's so full. We laughing, and then sit with what makes you uncomfortable. Ask questions, have difficult conversations, see who's at the play, see who's not at the play. Come again, learn something new. It is the beginning. It is the impetus of the conversation on how we all get free. So come on out and get free with us.
Goldie E. Patrick is a Detroit native. She is director of Confederates, and Will Street is a Detroit native and Philadelphia-based theater artist who is an actor in the play. Confederates opens to the public tonight at Detroit Public Theater. It runs through March. Thank you both so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was great.
From the WDET newsroom, one of the 3 finalists for Detroit's top police job was fired as Denver's transit police chief for allegedly displaying a lack of good judgment. Another filed for bankruptcy with more than $800,000 of debt. That's according to reporting from the Detroit News. The third candidate to replace James White as chief of police is the man temporarily doing the job, Todd Bettison.
Coming up at 11, our information landscape and the current political age are both marked by chaos. And that means that people have had to shift the way they engage with a variety of media outlets. And so in the next hour, we want to know, how has your media diet changed over time? Call in and let us know, 313-577-1019. We'll be right back here on the Metro. Stay with us.